Good afternoon. I'm Craig Ernstmeyer, and today we're going to talk about communicating effectively using images and words. Before we can talk about communicating effectively, I think it's important that we focus at the start. And when I say the start of our talents, our gifts, our abilities, which is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verses 4 through 11 reads, "Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are a variety of services, but the same Lord. There's a variety of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. Each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish between spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All of these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each of them individually as he wills." One of those gifts, obviously, is charisma. Charisma in Greek means special gift. And even if you don't have that special gift, you can get better at it so that you can communicate more effectively. But before we talk about communication and charisma, I think we have to start with what is the basic premise for effective communication. And it's the skill that I feel like is the most important one, and that's listening. When we start talking about charisma and communication, you have to start by being a good listener. As I interview different people for jobs at the work organization that I'm at, this is one of my interview questions. What is your greatest gift as a communicator? I'm listening to hear the answer. I'm a good listener. Not everybody has given that answer, and at the same time, I cannot recall a person who answered that correctly who didn't end up being a tremendous benefit to the school that I'm at. And so I think it's a very important characteristic. Effective listening at the same time is listening to understand. In the world today, I feel like we see a lot more of, I'm going to listen so I can get a word in edgewise, or I'm going to get it where I can respond to whatever it is you're saying without listening, without trying to understand what the other person is saying. Now, on to charisma. Because listening leads to effective use of various tactics, these tactics include three elements. The three elements are the author's credibility, which is their ethos, pathos, which refers to their emotional appeals, and logos, which is the means of persuasion that is used. And listening is a key important part of this because you need to be able to share each of those different pieces so that that person, that audience, will listen. Again, researchers have broken these tactics down various ways. The first one I'm going to show you is under the auspice, the character title of Charismatic Leadership Tactics. I'll show you another one later, but this one's broken down into verbal and nonverbal charismatic leadership tactics. And as I look at that list, tactics I can use more often moving forward are rhetorical questions. I rarely do that, and I think that's an opportunity that I have to get better. And purposefully reflecting the thoughts of the group. One reason I think that's important to begin to do a better job of is because that's a sign that you're listening to the group, and if you aren't able to do that, they are not going to be willing to continue to engage and listen. The other side of the CLTs is the nonverbal tactics. These nonverbal tactics is a much smaller list than the first list of the verbal tactics, but I don't feel like they are any less important. Uh, in this area, I can definitely see myself improving and animating my voice more often, pacing my speech better. I have the opportunity to pause, that dramatic pause that you hear about, and just to be aware of my facial expressions, because sometimes I think I respond uh, facially, but I don't recognize how I have responded, and it may not always be in a positive way. And then a use of appropriate gestures. If you get too many of those, it can take away from your message. And so figuring out what that is. But I'd really like to highlight two specific verbal tactics. The first is the three-part list. Here's a list of different three parts, and they are ones that a lot of people know: past, present, future, red, white, and blue, good, the bad, and the ugly. Three-part lists create easy to remember concepts of a speech or an idea. Three parts shows two things. It shows a pattern of completeness. If an idea has too many parts, it's going to be hard to capture all of them. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're giving enough to show some credibility. Recently, I've used that in a capital campaign that we went through with the idea of reaching up, reaching in, and reaching out. As I lead in the future, I think the three parts list is a universal tactic that can be used in a lot of different areas. And so, in addition to verbal communication, I think there are some other ones as well. The other one to highlight is stories and anecdotes. There are three different very famous speech givers. Each of them used stories and anecdotes. They made their message clearer and more engaging. They have the potential to create more confidence and inspiration as leaders share these stories and illustrate how the current issue has been handled in the past and potentially the resulting outcome if they were to change that tactic in the future. I think for myself, really the stories is a big part of this, because as we speak with various constituents, I'm a old math teacher, and so this is a very hard thing to not talk about numbers on. Here's our enrollment, here's our budget, those types of things. And I need to balance that out better with the use of stories, because I think that's what engages people more and makes them want to listen more, not all of those different numbers. Another approach, in addition to the CLTs that we were just talking about, Anderson and Duarte, talk about 5 steps to giving a killer presentation. I like the simplicity of this approach as well. One thing I feel like I can do a much better job of in terms of these 5 steps is starting right off with the first one, putting a tighter framework around the story. It's a key. Too often I go broad and wide and need to stay focused in on sharing the problem and what we're going to do to solve the problem. Another example of this for me moving forward is you always hear the term carpe diem, which is seize the day. We also talk about carpe eternum, which is seizing eternity, and to try to go back and forth, kind of that last bullet there, back and forth between what is and what could be, and talking about seizing the day here in the world, but also seizing eternity and just the opportunity that we have to share Jesus with others. So again, the key, remember the basics. Listen first. That is a key component. Also need to be aware of the body language, being friendly, being calm, warm, enthusiastic. That body language is key. It colors the message that you are trying to convey. An open, relaxed stance will make you appear approachable. I like the image of trying to pretend like you are talking to a close friend that you haven't seen in a year. It balances excitement with relaxation, with just trying to get your message out. And so I think those are some key points. But again, if you forgot already, remember, listen. That's the most important part. And use stories and anecdotes. It makes things more engaging. and more interesting and more inspirational for your audience. And again, as you can see on our list here, lists of 3 are very important. And so if you can use those 3 things and get better at them, you will use the gifts that you have been given to be a better communicator, both in front of a large audience, a small audience, and maybe just at home. Thanks for listening and paying attention, and God bless you as you continue to practice these different tactics.